Good afternoon, Sister Eunice. Glad you finally made it. Sister Marie John. Now, we add the, if you have a religious name, which you are, Sister Marie John, we add that because there are people that are going to watch this who knew you as Sister Marie John and don't know you as in your real name as Eunice. Yes, so that's why we're doing that. So welcome, and you're a wonderful addition to campus as we see you around and get to know you a little bit better. And you came here 2 years ago?
It was in August of 23, I believe.
August of 23, okay. Okay.
Near the end of the month.
All right. So you're well adjusted and you know all the tricks of the trade and how to get hither and yon.
Yes.
Until we started building, breaking down the buildings, and then you found some new ways to get places.
Right.
But you're adjusted. So your sister story. We're always anxious to hear or excited to hear our sister's history. You know, our beginnings really laid the foundation for who we are, and they were very critical to our life. So what we'd like you to do is to begin with where you began. You were born in Chicago.
Chicago,
In
Illinois.
fact, when I hear your name, I always associate you with Chicago. It's just funny. I know you've been other places, but you're a Chicago. And you're probably Aquinas, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yes.
Aquinas, Chicago. So what I want you to do is tell us about your family, your parents, your siblings, where you grew up, the schools, where you went to grade school, high school, people that were influential, and I'll guide you around with some questions on occasion.
Okay.
Okay? So it's
All right.
yours.
All right. Well, as we've already established, I was born in Chicago, and I was the youngest of 5 children. My mother and father were very good parents, you know, very old-time parents,
Yeah.
but very good parents.
When you say old time, what do you mean?
Well, you know, they weren't like ultra strict, but there were rules and regulations, and you knew where you stood or didn't stand in the family.
Right.
You know, I had the oldest in our family was a girl, and she's now deceased. And then came 3 boys, and my oldest brother is still living. He's 93, I believe. He lives in California. And he and his wife are both 92, 93. And they have had 9 children.
Lots of nieces and nephews.
Yeah, from them. And then my next brother was married. They had 4 children. He's deceased, as his wife is, and one of his kids. And then the next brother, which was next to me in age, and I was most closest to him, we were great pals. And the older ones always called us the Cats and Jammers. So
Why?
We just, you know, we were good together.
Oh, that's
we
nice.
liked each other, and you know, until when we got into high school, you know, that kind of, he went his way, I went our way kind of thing, you know. But if anybody tread on my ground, he was there protecting me,
Nice,
kind of thing.
nice.
So he was good. He was a diabetic early in life as a child. And he lived a long time, though. He died when he was 59.
Wow.
Which is a long time, was a long time for diabetics at that time.
Okay.
Because they didn't have the kinds of things they do now to care for them. And the way, you know, but at any rate, and then there's myself. And to say nothing, I was spoiled. And I loved every minute of it, I guess, you know. But it took me a long time to grow up. So when I got into the community, I went to Aquinas High School.
What about grade school?
Well, grade school, I went to the local parish, St. Mary Magdalene, on the southeast side of Chicago, in the steel mills area is where I lived. And so it was pretty much blue-collar workers. My father was a grocer and a butcher.
Oh,
So, you know, I grew up knowing the cuts of meats and,
wow.
you know, which end of the chicken I was eating or not eating. And the same thing with the cows.
Did he have a store?
Yeah.
Okay.
When I was little, he had a store just about 4 blocks away from our house. And we didn't have a car then, but he had a bicycle that he deliveries with, and they had a great big basket on the front of the bicycle where he put the groceries in when he was on a delivery. Well, when my brother and I were little kids, we'd run to the corner. We couldn't cross the street, but we'd run to the corner and wait for him to come from work, and then he'd lift us up and put us in the basket, and then we'd come home with them, which was just 5 houses off the corner,
Oh,
you know.
who cares?
But
It was a
a
ride.
big deal.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, as kids, it was a big deal for us. So, you know, and we were regular participants in the parish, and the boys all served Mass, and, you know, my dad was in the Holy Name,
Right.
and
right.
Mom was the Mothers Club. She, as a matter of fact, she was one of the founding mothers of the Mothers Club. She and 2 other women that became good friends with her were Mrs. Camel and Mrs. I forget the other lady.
So they were leaders in that area.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. They never saw themselves
No.
that way. And I don't know as I did, but as I look back, I can see that, you know, we were a regular family rosary
Right.
people, and, you know, getting up for First Friday Mass and things like that were just a regular part of our upbringing. So I had a very strong faith life as a child. The way I live it out today is still based on that. I see that as my foundation. But I choose to live it out in a different way. But it doesn't take away from the fact that without that, I don't know
Your foundation.
if yeah, I mean, it was a strong foundation. That's all I can say.
Now, your
So-
brothers, sports. You played sports with them, or did they?
There wasn't a lot of organized sports at that time,
Right.
you know, but we played a lot of baseball
Okay.
in the neighborhood. You know, we even made a baseball field out of one of the empty lots, you know, which we called prairies in Chicago.
Right, right. That's right. I know that.
Yeah.
Had
yeah.
enough Chicagoans in my crowd. Very
Yeah,
good.
yeah. There are some things that people learned about Chicago, like gangways,
Yeah.
which was the
Yeah.
space between 2 houses.
I never heard that one. Gangways. Okay.
Gangways, we always
Uh-huh.
called them gangways. But, you know, so those were specifically Chicago kinds of things, you know.
And you have 2 baseball teams in Chicago. How come?
Yes.
Quickly.
Well, North Side and South Side, never the twain shall meet.
So you have the Red Sox and the
No, the White Sox.
White Sox,
And the Cubs.
the Cubs. We just beat the White Sox, I think. But anyway, let's go on with your story.
Yeah, right. Well, I was a Cub fan, so that's okay. But
Okay.
usually people who grew up on the South Side were White Sox fans.
Got it. Okay.
But my father and my brothers were White Sox fans, so I was the outsider. I liked to be the Cubs fan,
Okay.
you know. But I went to the White Sox games because that's where my father was taking us.
Oh,
He
that's
didn't take
nice.
us to the Cub games.
I guess not.
I didn't get to Cubs Park, Wrigley Field, until I was an adult. But
So then you went to Aquinas to high school?
yeah,
Okay.
and I entered. You
Who
know.
was instrumental in your entering?
Sister Agnes Louise.
Oh, nice.
When I was, I had her a sophomore homeroom teacher, and you know we had the Fidelity,
Right?
and you were supposed to have a spiritual director in the sodality, or a director, kind of thing. So I asked her to be my director. We had these little books, and you had to say these prayers and mic them off, and then you told her that, yeah, you did that, and stuff like that. And, and that was when I was a sophomore, junior. And in my senior year, one day she said to me, "You never talk about entering anymore. Aren't you going to enter?" And I was like, "Are you kidding? No way." And so she dropped it. So, but it got me thinking. And then a little later on, I decided, I think I better talk to her about it. So, but I didn't want the other kids to know.
No, never.
So we met very surreptitiously.
Why didn't you want the other kids to know?
Because I wasn't the type that was going to enter.
Okay.
I think I was a little bit more rough and tumble
Yeah. Yeah.
than we saw the nuns being. And so, we met, and we met in this little closet. I'd sneak in, then she'd come a little later, and she'd sneak in. And we take care of everything, then we sneak out again. Crazy, but
She respected what your wishes.
She was good about
yes,
it,
yes.
and she played the game with me, But then when it came to, people started to know. And my parents were real surprised, especially since I wasn't crazy about school, and we were almost strictly then a teaching order. And so it was like, why are you joining them when, Well, I had looked into other sisters that did other kinds of things, and they just didn't appeal to me. And these sisters I knew, and they were always happy and joyous.
That's always what people say.
Yeah. And and they took care of each other. There was at the Aquinas convent, there was a sister that was sick, and, at lunchtime, the sisters took turns going over to be with her for a while. And, there are all kinds of things like that I saw that, I liked. So, and I had Felician sisters during my grade school years, and I wasn't drawn to them. So, but they didn't like that I wasn't. Well, my pastor, he knew me and knew more about me than I probably wanted him to know, but when I asked him for a recommendation, which we had to get from our pastors, he made me wait forever while he went and wrote this letter. And when he brought it down to me on my way home, I opened the envelope and looked, and it said, "She comes from a very good family." And I was like, whoa, what a recommendation that is. But they took me anyway.
Well, you came from a very good family.
Right.
Yeah.
Which was good. So anyhow, we entered and, went through the novitiate and all that stuff, and it was okay. Then my first mission, I was sent to Tucson. And I only stayed there a year and a half because in mid-year they called and transferred me to Joliet, Illinois. And I was there 7.5 years, I
Okay.
think, yeah. And I taught grade school,
Okay.
mostly double grades and then seventh,
Yeah.
fifth and sixth and then seventh grade. And that summer I was going to get changed. Well, Sister Rita Marie and my superior, whose name skips me right now. Anyway, they called me out of my class and they asked me if I'd go to Solon, North Dakota. And if I would, who would I ask to go with me?
Really? That was
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. And I named somebody, no, she couldn't go because of blah, blah, whatever. So then I named Jude Van Balen,
Okay.
and they said okay to that. So when Jude came in, I tried to intercept her before they did to give her the news, but I don't think I made it. But when she saw me, she was not happy because where she was teaching, she loved being there, and she wasn't for going out here. She had done some summer work out that way and was not interested. But she said yes to. So the two of us went out to Solon, North Dakota.
Was there anyone else out there? Any other Adrian Dominican?
No.
You were the only two?
900 miles from our nearest nuns. And we had 8 grades, 4 grades each.
You are kidding.
And
How many in the grade? And
well, you know, it was a small
yeah.
branch town and on the Indian reservation, but we were a white school,
Right.
you know. But it was it was German-Russian background. And they were lovely people when they got to know you, but they took a long time getting to know us. So, you know, you felt pretty stranded out there. And we only stayed there 2 years. We enjoyed being out there and liking it, but the community kind of forgot about us in a sense.
Were there people there before you?
Yes.
Nuns? There were some of us
a
be
long
there.
time.
Oh, really?
Our sisters
Okay.
had been there quite a while. But anyway, so that took care of that. And then the next place we went to was Minnesota. We went to Sherburn, and our sisters had been there for quite a while. We did not have a school there. We had a religious education,
Catechetical, yeah.
well, which at that time was called a catechetical.
Yeah.
And we were transitioning from catechism to whatever this new thing was, which we didn't have a clue. And so we made it up as we went along.
You mean teaching religious ed?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And
You didn't go away and get trained for that?
Huh?
You didn't go get trained for
No,
okay.
no training. During the summers
And
we
there were
went.
the two of you and the Holy Spirit were there, huh?
Yeah, yeah. And Jude was a very creative teacher, which was my salvation. So she would do all the presenting, and I'd set up the chairs and the tables and make the coffee and all that kind of
That's
stuff.
important.
Yeah.
Our coffee's important.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Well, and so we made a great pair.
Yes.
You know, I taught
No,
too,
really.
but, you know, but basically so, you know, and we were there, I think, 7 years.
Oh, my.
And then we decided it was time to move on, and one of the priests from the New Ulm Diocese had heard about us, and so he called and asked us if we'd come and look at the parish they were in, which we did. And so we moved there, which was even farther away.
So that was at a period of time that we were allowed to choose where we wanted to go,
Yeah.
I take it, okay.
Yeah. Going to Sherburn, we kind of fell into, you know, and we had some funny experience. You know, we
Yeah.
had some funny stories that go with all that. But anyway, so we went to this Tracy and Walnut Grove. We lived in Walnut Grove, and we ministered in Tracy and Walnut Grove. And eventually, how that worked out was Jude was doing the religious education in both places. In the meantime, we were going during the summer times to Mundelein to pick up some religion.
Okay. They just updated.
know.
You were updating yourselves.
Yes, we were. We spent time updating, and it was a wonderful experience, you know. But anyway, so we went back, and then I began in Walnut Grove to just naturally kind of get into visiting people, you know,
Nice.
in the
Good.
hospital, in their homes, and all those kinds of things, and working with the religious education. So we, you know, they were small parishes. So, well, Tracy was a little bit bigger than Walnut Grove. But eventually, I was asked by the bishop if I would be willing to become like the pastor of Walnut Grove. They called us pastoral assistants or
right,
something, you
right.
know. And that was early on. I mean, nobody even knew what that was.
No, so you were.
Yeah, so we were, you
The
know,
front runner in
making
that.
it up as we went on. That seemed to be my mission in life.
Oh, making it
was
up.
making it up as we got on. But it worked.
It did.
You know, it worked.
There was more to it.
There really was, you know.
Yeah.
But, you know, but the thing that I found out was I never had the schooling before I did the thing. I always got the schooling after I did the thing. But it worked in those days.
Well, yes, it worked in those days, and I
It
think a
wouldn't
lot of
work
us.
today,
Yeah,
but
no, no way.
it did
Yeah,
then.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way most of us were doing our missions, you know. And then the next place I went to was St. Louis. And I worked with Jana Capone there. She was the director of the house called Emmaus, and I was the facilities director. So I took care of the convent, which housed 31 people.
Wow.
You know, got all the groceries, did all that kind of stuff. And, you know, and it was funny when my dad came to visit, my mom had died already. She died when I lived in Sherburn, but Dad came to visit, and I saved going to do all the shopping with him so that he could, because he was a grocer.
That's
for
right.
all
That's
his
right.
life, you know, and I wanted him to see what, you know, what I was doing. So we went to all of the butchers I went to, we went to the warehouses I went to, we went to the stores I went to, all that stuff. And while we were visiting after that, he said to me, "Now, where'd you learn all that?" I said, "From you and Ma."
What did he say to that?
And he said, "You did?"
Isn't that
I said,
something?
"Well, Dad,
That's-
I worked with you in a store, and we'd sit at the table, and you would tell us where this cut of meat came from, and how you were able to butcher this, and how you did that, and you'd take
Did
us
he
to
butcher it himself too?
Yeah,
We did.
sure. So they, you know, because, you know, when they would buy the, you know, things in the stores, they would,
Yeah, have
you
the
know,
slab. Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, oh, he said, wow, that's really something. And it was, you know.
Well, sure.
Yeah. So it was a good time for me. I really enjoyed working at the Emmaus community. And I was there for 11 years. And then the philosophy of stuff changed, and so the house, it kind of closed down. And so my next ministry was in Chicago. Bob Doherty heard about me.
That's right, St. Leonard's house. Yes.
Yes, Bob Doherty
right.
heard about me. I think it was Kathy Nolan
Yeah.
had said, get her, she's what you need. So he, you know,
Good.
he got me. You know, he said, when you come in for the meeting, we'll talk. And there was no job description, nothing. We were making up as we were going
That's
along.
when they first started that. Did they have Grace House at that time? Was that part
Not quite,
No, Leonard's
no.
was the very first
Yeah.
one, right?
Leonard's is in you know, they celebrated their 70th year.
Oh, 70th. Oh,
yeah.
okay. So I
So
didn't
they had
realize
they had
Yeah.
a long history already.
Yeah.
You know, but they never had someone who specifically took care of facilities. Bob was doing that
That's
while he
right.
was doing everything else.
Yeah. So
And
Bob and the Adrian Dominican Sisters really got Leonard's house
on
kept
its
feeding it.
feet
Yes.
after,
Yes.
yeah. And it's going strong today.
That's right.
But
That's right.
many of our sisters were there.
Yes.
And I was there for 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first started to work there, I was in a very extreme accident.
Mm.
I was hit by a van while I was riding my bike. And I was taken to Stroger's Hospital, which was Cook County at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't think I was living because they couldn't get a pulse. But they stuck with me for a while, and I came to. And then I was pretty well battered up.
Wow.
But eventually they were able to bring me into Adrian, and I was here recuperating for about 7 months. And when I went to see the orthopedic man, because I had a broken pelvic bone, and so when I went to my very last visit with him, he said to me, I said to him, now Doc, when can I get back to work? And he said, what do you mean work? I said, well, I got a full-time job waiting for me in Chicago. And he said, full-time job? He said, you're never going to work full-time. I said, oh, okay. So I came back to campus, and Darlene Southward was
Yes. Yeah.
and come on, tell me, what did he say? What did he say? And I told her, and she said, he doesn't know you.
Yeah. I was going to say.
And Bob held the job for me, and it took me some time
Uh-huh.
to get back into it. Was about a year and a half to almost 2-year hiatus that, you know, to get my body back in shape.
Wow.
But
I never
I
knew
worked
that.
12 years after that.
I never knew that about you.
Yeah.
We're going to have to, this is only 30 minutes. I think I could go on and on listening to your life experience. Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
So you've had various ministries,
Yes.
and I think there's more to it than just being there by, what do they say, the seat of your pants, or there's some acronym that's,
yeah.
You were very open to the Spirit. That was obvious. As you,
Very.
yes, and here I am, whatever you want to
Yeah.
do with me. But as you look at those ministries, particularly, well, the one with your family, that was a given. That certainly stirred up everything and got you moving. But was there one in particular that, briefly, you could share with us that was extremely significant to you, a ministry? And maybe it was the one to yourself when you had to heal.
Yeah, I think so. I had 2 extreme times of healing for myself.
Uh-huh.
One was that accident,
Yeah.
and one was while I was still in Minnesota, I came to grips with the disease of alcoholism, and I went into a rehab place, and my life changed dramatically. And I was so grateful for that.
Wonderful.
And it's a miracle. You know, I've celebrated a number of years of sobriety now, and people say, well, you know, doesn't it bother you when you could drink all you want in front of me, I could care less. It's just not a part of my life. God has really blessed me in both of those, because there's a lot of healing that takes place in coming to after alcoholism. And the same thing with the physical, when I was hit by the, you know, by the van. It was a church van. And, you know, it took a long time to come to, but I never thought I wouldn't make it. People said, well, didn't you think you were going to die? No, never crossed my head.
You had that job waiting.
I did. You know, and I learned a lot. In any of the ministries I had, I think I learned more than I gave.
And what did you learn most about yourself during your lived experience so far that you could share with us, that we could learn from?
Well, I think to just pay attention to yourself and let yourself be yourself and not worry so much about what people are thinking about you. You know, and don't worry. You know, worrying never helped me. All it did was create more worry. So I think the one thing I learned was don't bother worrying. It isn't going to help you anything. Just live in the day.
But you did worry about today.
I do. I have to admit that.
Now, is it so bad?
No, this is so wonderful.
Well, it's amazing the depth at which you shared yourself with us, and I certainly am edified by that, inspired by that honesty that
Well,
you're
thank
sharing with
you.
the congregation, with all those who are going to see this. It certainly is a gift. You've given us a gift because of all those that have gifted you. So that's really
Yes.
important.
I have
Yeah.
been gifted, and I'm so grateful for that. And I'm very grateful for what we continue to, how we continue to be blessed here on this campus.
Thank you. That's right. May
We-
we all remember that.
Yes. Every sister that I meet, I can really see as blessing. You know, now it's not that I never get aggravated with people, but it doesn't last long.
Yeah. And we are blessed also with all our coworkers, our staff,
Absolutely.
everything, our every
Aren't
needs.
they great?
Yes, yeah.
They-
Take time.
Wonderful people.
Yeah. We are who we are because they have also touched our lives.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us?
I don't think so. I
If
think
we
I
dug-
blew my wad.
Oh, no, I think there's a lot more down there, too. I do believe that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, and I think we might have to air your story for those 2 weeks, because after one hears it, oh, did you listen to Eunice's story? Yes, and how my sympathy on the loss of your dear friend Jude, which was a
Yes.
few years back.
Yes.
That was another hardship for you.
That was a terrible hard blow, and a very hard, and I still miss her.
Right, I'm sure. Now, I noticed that your name, your religious name was Marie John, and how did you get that? How did you
Well-
name yourself that?
My mother's name is Pearl,
Yeah, I see that.
and my father's name is Walter. And that didn't sound very good. Pearl, Walter, Pearl. So I dipped in. Mom's had a Mary in her name,
Got it, yeah.
and Dad had a John.
Good.
I couldn't get married John or John Mary because they were taken. So Marie John was okay. John Marie was already taken. So I took Marie John.
Good. And your brothers, we kind of left them along the side. A couple of them are deceased. Is anyone in the family besides nieces and nephews?
Well, my oldest brother's still living.
okay.
He's in California.
Oh, that's
His
good.
wife is. They're 92 and 93.
Oh, that's right, you did mention
And they're living in their own house and taking care of themselves, and you know,
Well,
they're
that's
amazing.
good. You've got good genes, so you're going to be around for a while.
I guess so.
Yeah. Well, thank you ever so much, and I hope that you really believe that what we have said. You truly are a gift here on this campus. So keep
Thank you.
being who you are,
Thank you.
because that's what we want. We want women of integrity here who aren't afraid to stand up and be heard.
No,
Yeah.
no, we aren't.
So we shall all anxiously await Sister Story.
Yikes.
Eunice. Okay. Thank you.